Welcome to Scout's Eye, presented by Sports Info Solutions. Here's your host, Jeff Dean.
Hey, welcome to Scout's Eye, presented by Sports Info Solutions. I'm your host, Jeff Dean, and with me are my colleagues, Jordan Edwards and Nathan Cooper. And this week, we're going to be talking about the NFL Draft. It's going to be an overall recap. We're going to talk about some of the teams Vince we like, some of the draft classes we like and don't like, and kind of some of our big takeaways. But first, Coop, how did the draft go over with our process, and what were some of the good things that our whole scouting department did together?
Yeah, we watched, including guys who came back, for next year, we watched almost 750 players overall. We watched, I think, about 675 for this draft class. Ton of guys. We had 388 on our site, which is awesome. And this year, we actually had 241 out of the 257 that were drafted. So that's 94%, best we've ever done. We only had 10 guys if you exclude like the special teamers, the international guys. International players, it seems like that's going to be something that's going to start popping up more and more. And then only 2 players that we didn't even watch. So that's the one big thing for me. I hate seeing guys get drafted that we didn't watch, but 2 players, I can roll with that. So overall, it was a great process, great year, and keep getting better every year. So we'll look to do the same next year.
Yeah, I think you're right. The international players are trying to get a little more hype, especially just because there are just some ridiculous physical freaks out there, and they're starting to find their way to the football field. So I think that's going to be something we continue to look forward to. But for overall teams, we have a couple teams I think each of us want to kind of talk about. So, Coop, why don't you kick us off? What draft class did you love?
Yeah, I mean, this is the team that actually came in 10th on our rankings, but the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, you start off with Marvin Harrison Jr., who was our top player. You get him at number 4. And then you have a second-round pick, get Darius Robinson. There was a lot of talk that the Lions could have even jumped up in front of them to take him if Arnold wasn't still there. So getting him with your second pick in the first round is a great spot. Very versatile guy who can play on the edge. He can bump inside, do a little bit of everything for them. Then you get Max Melton, Trey Benson, those guys, second and third round there. Guys who we had as 6'5" type of players. They did take a little bit of a lull. Isaiah Adams, Ryman, Elijah Jones, we feel more of like top backup type players, but then got back on track in the 4th and 5th round. Dadrian Taylor Demerson, really good athlete on the back end, very rangy as a safety there. We had a 6'5" on, and then I'm a big Xavier Thomas guy. I'll be the first to say that he definitely underperformed in college at Clemson. Didn't have a lot of production that you would expect a top recruit to have, but you look at his pressure numbers are really good. Reminded me of like a Byron Young who came out last year out of Tennessee, ended up being, in the rookie of the year discussion for the Rams. So getting him in the 5th round, I think was a great pick there. So I think overall the Cardinals, typically whenever you rank, when we rank the classes after, teams that have a lot of picks, just, when you look at the average, it's going to tend to be a little bit lower on the ranking, but 12 picks and be 10th, that's saying something there. So they got a lot of good talent in this class.
Yeah, absolutely. So just so people are aware, they were our 10 team. Our number 1 team this year was the Bears. But like you mentioned, they only had 5 picks. We don't write punters up for sites, so it took a tiny bit of a hit, but basically they got 5 starters if you count the punter with all 5 of their picks, which is really hard to do, especially when you're talking 144 and they got kind of a steal or out, what we believe in Austin Booker. But Jordan, tell me about a team you really liked.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Rams. They're a team lately that hasn't had any, top level draft picks recently. This is their first round pick since I believe that they took Jared Goff. And so a lot of the rumors going into the day were that they were definitely going to take an offensive player, no matter what, just because it felt like it was something that they would do to try and add another piece to the high profile offense that they already have. But they ended up going with Jared Verse, who we think is a really good solid level starting defensive end. Somebody that's a little bit different than Young, that's on the other side, who's a little bit more high level, speed off the edge versus more power, speed to power, bull rush type of edge rusher, high motor, all those kinds of things. And so that was a little of a surprising fit, but I think it works good just based off of what they already have. And they get his teammate the next day with Braden Fisk to kind of help try and replace what Aaron Donald leaves on the interior of the defensive line. he's somebody that has a lot of those same kind of traits where quick first step, explosion, really flashy kind of with his hands, and some of that athleticism. And then to round out the second day, they go with Blake Corum, who I think is a really good kind of pairing with what they do on offense for their run style. They're a team that really has gone away from a lot of the Shanahan McVay, outside zone, wide zone type of run schemes. They run duo a lot. They run right at you, and that's what Kyron Williams and Blake Corum are really, really good at. Corum, was devastating. Running the ball with duo with Michigan. He's got that really good first jump cut, so he can kind of press the hole, jump outside to the left or right, give him a two-way go. And he has a little bit of involvement in the passing game. He can block he can pass protect a little bit. And then Cameron Kitchens is somebody that he was our second ranked safety. We have him as a 6'7" starting level grade. He's somebody that didn't test very well. Had a really good 2022 year. 2023 wasn't as good, but he's got enough range. I think the instincts are really good. He turns the ball over as well. He's somebody that's not afraid to be in run support either. And so they've done a really good job, with their type of defensive scheme and elevating the play of defensive backs that are, not as highly thought of, or maybe they're not the best athletes, and they do a really good job at kind of rounding those players out and getting good production out of them. And then on day 3, they're a team that the last couple of years they've had to rely on filling out the rest of their roster with and getting production out of the bottom of the draft that they get. So maybe a guy like Tyler Davis is somebody that can be a depth piece on the inside. They pick a kicker. Jordan Whittington is kind of an energy level receiver. He'll do some stuff on special teams, dirty work, all that kind of stuff in the slot. And then Bo Wimmer was a guy that we had rated highly as a starting level center that they were able to get in the back of the 6th round. And so, that kind of adds depth, and maybe he ends up eventually starting for them at some point down the road. So a lot of picks. I think they got a lot of really good fits here with what they do. And they're a team that just gets production out of really everybody that they drafted over the last handful of seasons.
Yeah, it's weird to talk about them with the first round pick. It's been a long time. So the team I want to talk about is the Vikings, who had a interesting draft, I think is the best way to phrase it. So they came in needing a quarterback, and the player everybody thought they were going to take was J.J. McCarthy. They ended up taking him, which I am not 100% sold on J.J. McCarthy by any means, but I do understand the value that you have to place in the quarterback position, and if they thought that was the guy, we saw what was happening with the quarterbacks ahead of that, and so they weren't going to be able to wait any longer and get him. I mean, considering Bo Nix went off just 2 picks later too, like they felt like that was the guy that was going to be a great pick, and then they traded back up and got the best defensive player in the draft in Dallas Turner. I would, you could argue between him and Lotz, but I think it's very close. I think they do different things, and so I think Dallas Turner definitely fits what the Vikings were looking for more. So I think that's a fantastic fit for them in the first round. My issue is the trades that it took to get there. They lost so much draft capital. They didn't have any picks on day 2 this year at all. They made almost 100 picks between Turner and Kyrie Jackson. Thought was good value from where they got him. And then next year, they are just already depleted of draft picks. And so what you do in a situation like this is you give J.J. McCarthy a lot of current weapons that he has and stuff like that, but he can't build on that moving forward. If J.J. McCarthy struggles at any capacity or the team isn't good enough around him, they don't have hardly any ammunition to do something about it next year. So it is something to definitely concern with, especially the fact that Justin Jefferson's about to be a $30 million man. That is a lot of draft capital to lose when you have expenses like that. Christian Darrisaw is gonna start counting against the both heavily soon. You have other positions like TJ Hawkinson that are above league average. And so at some point you have to make sacrifices, and their defense doesn't really have a lot of places you can make sacrifices. So I think they're going to have to remove a weapon for JJ McCarthy or continue moving forward. So overall, I liked the first round selections in some moderation. I was glad they didn't trade all the way up to draft JJ McCarthy at like 6 or 7 or somewhere in that range. So the fact that they moved up one spot wasn't as costly. But the rest of their draft, I think, like I said, Kyrie Jackson is a really good pick for where they got him. I think he has a potential to be a starter. There are some weaknesses to his game, but with that kind of length and ball production, it's a good pick. After that, they got mostly backup and low-level players, but with some bigger competition that could end up providing value. So I think that, again, they relied very heavily on the top half of the draft and then kind of use the back half as maybe a testing ground for some players. I'm not sold on any other late round picks, but we shall see. One thing before we mention a couple of team fits we found interesting, Coop. So let's talk about the Jags draft class real quick. It was our lowest ranked draft class this year with 9 picks and an average grade of 5.93. So maybe explain just a little bit on what they could have done or maybe why that draft class was ranked so low.
Yeah, obviously we think highly of Brian Thomas. I ended up watching and writing him up, and that's your guy who's going to be that height, weight, speed guy. He's going to be that vertical threat. I think he is going to come in and replace what Calvin Ridley brought to the team. You have him. Obviously, you have a Gabriel Davis out there as well, another big target. So I think him coming in is going to be a great for Trevor Lawrence and that receiving core. But beyond that, the rest of their picks, they only got one player who we felt was better than a backup, and that was Javon Foster. And really, we think that he's more of that backup swing tackle. So he has the versatility there, but everybody else is more top backup or more depth type players. So Mason Smith is a guy who has the measurables, he has the athleticism, but very raw. It's going to take him a little bit of time to kind of fill into that role. So he could be an awesome player, in 2 or 3 years. But again, we're grading by year 2. In this, the first year and likely into the second year, you're looking at a guy who could be a good top backup. So that's a little rich for, I think, where we thought. Jerry and Jones, good speed, solid player at corner. Could be a guy that maybe plays a little inside, outside. Did that at Florida State. Is a little bit smaller though, so he, if you just throw him on the outside, those bigger receivers are going to get him a little bit. So I think he could be a strong slot corner. But again, more of that top backup, number 4 type of corner. And taking him in the 3rd round, again, a little bit too rich. Beyond that, if you look at the back end of the draft, solid depth pieces again there. Jordan Jefferson, another guy who could come in, with his teammate Mason Smith, be depth along the defensive line. DeAndre Prince, another depth corner there. Keelan Robinson's a guy who, with the new kickoff rules, could come in and be a solid kick returner. But as a running back, he only had 12 carries last year. Made him count. But he's a guy that, I think he has a little bit of development left to do as a running back, but should be able to come in and contribute on special teams right away. You get a kicker, which was a little interesting considering they had 2 on the roster already. I did see that they got rid of Joey Sly, so it looks like it'll be Cam Little versus Riley Patterson there. And then Miles Cole. This is another Texas Tech guy that just has the, the height, weight measurables. That's just like freaky, but didn't put it all together. I know a Tyree Wilson type of guy, coming out last year. Definitely not that type of player, and not that type of athlete, but the measurables are there. Freaky wingspan and arm length. So you have a little bit there that you can throw in, see what happens. So overall, the Jags draft, good depth pieces, but not a lot of guys that I think are going to make an impact year 1, year 2 outside of Brian Thomas.
Balky definitely has a type on his defensive line. Cole, Jefferson, Smith, long, tall, long, powerful, all those types of guys that they even have on their roster. And then what you said about Keelan Robinson, it just hit me when you're talking about it. This is also probably a Doug Peterson pick, because I would assume that he probably takes the Jamal Agnew role on the offense. Maybe they get him moving in space. They like to do the jet motions and the orbit motions and all those kinds of things. So maybe this was probably a Doug Peterson fell in love with this guy just because he might be able to do something with him, rather than playing Jamal Agnew, 25 offensive snaps in a game. So
Yeah, for sure. That was an interesting class all the way, because again, they took Brian Thomas and I'm like, yeah, great fit, love it. And then they kind of went really high measurable guys, for several picks after that. And I'm like, if it turns out great, you have some crazy length. But I mean, look at what Tyree Wilson did in year 1. And I think coming in, he was so much better than Miles Cole is, coming in. And so we'll see how it turns out. I think it's more of a 3 to 4 year projection for that draft class. And like I said, day 1, year 2, that's what we grade. So we'll see. But all right, so let's hear about some team fits we either like or found surprising. Coop, what do you want to start with?
Yeah, the biggest surprise for me, I mean, there were a couple, but looking at day 3, the Lions ended up taking 2 of our top guys, in the top 55, 60 picks, Mekhi Wingo and Christian Mahogany. So you can talk about either of those guys. I'm going to talk about Mahogany a little bit. I think this is a guy pre-2022. He gets hurt in 2022, misses the entire season. You watch this 2021 tape, he looks like an early day 2 guy. This is a guy who has some mauling tendencies, moves around really well at guard, really solid in the run game. Obviously not the elite pass protector, but something that he can kind of improve on a little bit. To get a guy like that in the 6th round, I think is huge. And you look at the fit too in Detroit. They just signed Zeitler only to a 1-year deal. They lost Jonah Jackson. Graham Glasgow's probably going to take that other guard spot. But for me, I love Graham Glasgow as like your circumstantial starter, but like legit backup. So he can be a guy that can play any of the 3 interior positions, but I like him more if he's that number 6 lineman. So maybe Mahogany can get to that level, like, by year 2, you can plug him in. He can be that other starting guard there. And then obviously if Zeitler leaves after a year, you have him in Glasgow. But I think it's a great fit. I think what he does in terms of the mauling ability and what he does in the run game fits the grit and the attitude that Detroit likes. So for him to be there, late in the 6th round, I think is an awesome fit and great pick there for Detroit moving forward.
Nice, Jordan. When you have
I'm gonna stay in LA for mine. I'm gonna go to the Chargers though. Junior Colson was probably was my linebacker when he was all linebacker 1. He was somebody really good tape this past year. However, at the end of the season, he had a couple of hand injuries. Wasn't able to test this offseason as well coming into the draft. So slipped down a little bit. Ended up still going before pick 70 here, but top of the 3rd round. But he goes to somewhere where the defensive coordinator knows him, trusts him. He knows what he's going to get in that, along with Jim Harbaugh as well, being there all from Michigan. So I think this is somebody that you're going to put in the middle of your defense where the Chargers have really struggled since Brandon Staley's been there. They missed on Kenneth Murray. He's already gone to Tennessee. And so they need somebody in the middle of their defense to kind of help fortify things. I think this is the guy to do that. He's going to end up being the leader of the defense as well. And then one other one that I have is we talked about him the last time we were on here with Michael Hall from Ohio State. I think he probably went to the perfect team for him. And so with the Cleveland Browns, just because the type of defense that they use, attacking, relentless type of pass rush style, somebody that can just kind of be able to tee off when they need to as a pass rusher. Somebody that he doesn't need to come in right away, which we have a backup grade on him of 5'9" at the moment, something that they don't really need at the moment as well. But in a couple of years, maybe eventually it does end up becoming a starting level player. He's just somebody that's going to be able to produce as a pass rusher pretty much, right off the bat next season.
Yeah, I have something I want to talk about, but you talking about a player that went to the perfect team that might outperform it. I'm very similar with Xavier Worthy. I look at Xavier Worthy, and there's a lot to like, but I was like, the one team that could absolutely just immediately unlock his potential could be the Chiefs. And of course, that's where he went. And we joked about it. We're like, do they only want the same type of small, fast, quick receivers? Or are they going to go different? And they stuck to their roots. But yeah, I think that is a perfect fit for him, as long as they is not expected to be just a day 1 dynamic game-changing weapon, because he's not going to be Tyreek Hill from day 1. I don't believe. And obviously Tyreek Hill, you don't want to compare anybody to, so I'm not going to. But when Tyreek Hill was a part of that offense, I think a big reason for his success outside of his natural ability and how good he normally is the fact that he was able to be used the way that he was most beneficial, because they had players like Travis Kelce. And even at that time, they had some decent running game and could get guys out in space on the backfield too. And so I think that role allowed him to succeed. And I think Xavier Worthy is allowed to just operate with some free releases and kind of keep them coming over the middle and downfield at different times during the game. I think it's going to be very beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that like they knew that they probably shouldn't have gone receiver in the 1st round. But then when all your immediate starting level tackles run out at where they were, then they're like, all right, we have Patrick Mahomes. Let's just chuck a dart at the board and see if it hits.
Yeah, and again, if it hits, they look like geniuses. All gas, no break. But the one player I want to talk about is the definition of best player available, and that's Brock Bowers of the Raiders. So I think all of us know, or at least when in pre-draft, I think the Raiders had some other needs that they could have addressed, right? They could have gone offensive line. They did get Jackson Powers Johnson in the second round, phenomenal fit there. So that's helped mitigate it a little bit. I think their defense could have used a lot of help too. And at the position where they were taking, where they could have taken any defensive player on the board. And I know they just went Tyree Wilson last year, but if you could have gone someone like Dallas Turner, I don't think anyone would have batted an eye. Just getting yourself an extra dynamic edge player and then allow Tyree Wilson to test himself to step up this year, or just take a little bit off his shoulders and allow him to be a more situational player, which I think could work too. But with Brock Bowers there, that was, according to the Raiders, the too good of a deal to pass up. I think that the fact that they have Gardner Minshew playing into that decision greatly. When they had no quarterbacks really on the board that they could have taken, was 6 that went ahead of them. So I think that they thought that instead of reaching for a quarterback, or instead of trying to maybe plug a different role, they just would try to make their offense more dynamic. And then the quarterback that if they eventually want to build around, they could just slide right into this team. Michael Mayer and him have some really nice balance as part of it. However, I do think that Mayer may be a little more constricted when you also bring Bowers out there, because it's going to be tough for, I think, both of them to get the releases and the scheme fits they want at the same time. So, I think their 2 tight end sets could get a little clunky in the middle, especially when you don't have a dominant run blocker in Michael Mayer. Good, but not dominant by any means. And then Brock Bowers is definitely best in space. So I think it could create some fun offensive schemes. I do worry that it's going to limit their offense a little bit in the short to mid game, without giving them the enough of the outside threats that they were maybe desiring going into the draft. So I like the fit there. I do think it kind of changes their team dynamic in a positive way. And like we said, maybe he was the best player on the board at that time. But I do question if this is going to be a long-term success for their team, or if it's just kind of an immediate reaction. Okay, so the last thing I want to bring up is, what do teams do now? So, we come to the end of the draft, and there are still plenty of free agents available. There's a whole summer to go before the season. So do we have a team that we feel might have some work to do, that has Super Bowl aspirations, that still has to sign a free agent in order to reach those? Cool.
I mean, I'll kind of go back to the Lions a little bit. I think one of the positions that going in, you were thinking that the Lions could address is receiver. They lose Josh Reynolds. I think Josh Reynolds, not dynamic by any means, but he did have the familiarity with Jared Goff. Was a guy that, he's good for like 2 catches and, 45 yards and a touchdown just about every week. But now you look at that receiver room. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the easy leader in there. You have Jameson Williams, who came on strong, the last half of the season last year. You have a Khalif Raymond, in the slot as your return guy. So I think those guys, Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think they could have used another receiver. They did sign a couple of slot guys, Isaiah Williams and Jalen Calhoun, after the draft. I think it would be nice to have a little bit bigger receiver, a guy that kind of fills that Josh Reynolds role. So I don't know if that's something that, maybe Jameson Williams is going to be that guy, and they'll just kind of fill in around it with some more, slot types and small receiver kind of looks. But I think receiver was the one spot that they could potentially go and try to get a little bit bigger, get that number 4, number 5 player, and really plug him in. Obviously, they did what they needed to do, go out and get corner help with their first 2 picks. I think those were home runs, but I think they could use another receiver. I know they've been in the talks, obviously, whether it's a T. Higgins or some of these other, guys who are looking for trades. I don't know if they'll pull that trigger, but it's something to explore moving forward for sure.
I'll go with the Dolphins. They were a team that they lost a lot of players from their team last year. They struggled with injuries at the end of the season, obviously losing Jalen Phillips to an Achilles injury. Teron Armstead has become, for as good as he is, extremely unreliable just in terms of availability. And so you kind of thought that maybe they would try and address the offensive line more than they did, just because they had, it seemed like, just a new lineup kind of out there every week. They did pick Patrick Paul in the second round. And so I think that that's something where he can eventually be a starting left tackle. But then kind of they double up on edge. They also went with another running back as well in the fourth round. And so they kind of filled a lot of things that they already do well. Maybe trying to edge their kind of forecasting for the future, but I think that the team right now is good enough to obviously compete for I think close to a Super Bowl. I don't know if they're true Super Bowl contenders, but I think at their highest level, they're definitely right there. So I'm interested to see what kind of else they do on the offensive line. I still think corner is a way that they might need to try and address with on the back end, just because they lost so many guys. And so I'm interested to see what the rest of this, how this team pans out before the 2024 season. And then they also have the Tua decision coming up, whether that be this offseason that it gets done or maybe in the season, or if they just kind of push it until next offseason as well.
I like it. So mine's a little different. I think it's kind of an underrated possible team pairing, but I'm looking at the Eagles inside of somebody like Connor Williams. So Connor Williams recovering from an injury, so he's somebody that if they are patient with and doesn't need to start, this can make a lot of sense for him. They have a solid offensive line through and through right now, but their right guard position is kind of a little, depending on who you like, could be Tyler Steen, Matt Hennessy, or if they think Trevor Keegan and they just drafted could start there. I think are all possible options. But again, if you get something like Connor Williams that is willing to take a 1-year deal, especially while he's just coming back from an injury, prove that he's worthy again of another long-term extension, I think that could be a great fit for him, and I think that would kind of make that offensive line unstoppable. They battled injuries in the past before, so I don't think having extra depth pieces ever hurts, especially when you look at how the Eagles have really put an emphasis on their offensive and defensive lines. I think it could be something that is always on the table. They've got the receiving weapons. They went out and got Saquon Barkley, so I think that offense is going to be a much different style than it was last year, when sometimes they got a little one-directional, and I think that their defense is going to be, again, real solid. They got some pieces back from they were missing in the past. I think that they got some experience for a lot of their young defensive tackles. I think that's going to be a team that already is Super Bowl contender, but I think this is one piece that could be a very valuable addition. But I want to thank both of you for your time today, and for everybody listening. This has been Scout's Eye and Jeff Dean, Jordan Edwards, and Nathan Cooper. We'll see you next time.